The Cleveland Browns completed their eighth training camp practice today. Obviously, the talk of camp to this point has certainly been the two rookie quarterbacks. And while one seems to continue his climb, the other had a very, very difficult day. There's a lot of other things we're going to get to here. So we're going to break it all down. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. All of us here at the OBR appreciate everybody who comes on out. End of the month, of course, for July. Big tick, in the numbers upward. Everybody's excited for football to be back. We're excited for all of you to continue to come back and, just continue to read some really great Cleveland Browns content from our fabulous group of writers here. Make sure you head over to the OBR.com. You look into and possibly acquire the VIP access. You get the insider forums. You get the Ask the Insiders. A lot of great stuff for you guys there. Some juicy nuggets to get yourself basically ahead of your Cleveland Browns friends, fans, as far as the conversations and the topics for this 2025 team. Make sure you continue to come on out every evening starting at 6 p.m. to the OBR streaming network, beginning with Browns 3D. It is Friday. You will have Things I Think I Know coming up a little bit later. Brad Ward slated to start at 7 o'clock, so make sure you're here for that. And make sure, of course, that you're following the OBR and subscribed on YouTube. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed over on Twitch. I guess before we get to today's practices, with the Terry McLaurin news, and now late this afternoon, the Micah Parsons news, I guess let's preface it with this. Just because a player is, voicing his displeasure with his current contract situation with his employer and maybe mentioning and requesting that, he no longer wants to be part of said team. Guys, we just went through this in January here with the Browns. Of course, we all know what was said by Myles Garrett, what was put out there. This is certainly a bargaining tactic, of course, for Terry McLaurin, certainly for Micah Parsons. And this is, when things hit a standstill, then either the team goes to the media or the player and his agency go to the media, trying to amp things up to hopefully maybe get some progression and some resolution to these, contract talks. The Browns would not be interested in trading for Terry McLaurin, and not a knock on Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is about to be 30 years old. If you all remember, less than 1 year ago, right around the time that Amari Cooper was turning 30 years old, the Cleveland Browns were basically, getting ready to basically exile themselves from Amari Cooper. Terry McLaurin would cost significantly more in a trade than what the Browns gave up for Amari Cooper or what they got back for Amari Cooper. Then you have to pay him on top of that. If the Browns were interested and truly wanted to go, the wide receiver route, they had every opportunity to do so when they held the number 2 selection in this past draft. Could have just taken Travis Hunter, would have had, a wide receiver under contractual control for 5 years at a much cheaper rate than what is probably going to take to satisfy Terry McLaurin and his camp. It's just not something the Browns are going to do. And I hear, I got a lot of clap backing on today on this. Look, I understand apparently that because if Terry McLaurin went to Ohio State, there's obviously some higher value there. Guys, we can't do that. Okay, we got to stop with that. It doesn't matter that Terry McLaurin has been really good the last 2 years. Amari Cooper was really good in 22 and 2023, and that still did not, change the fact that the Cleveland Browns thought that they had got the best, and he was hitting that age where you expect, the decline to come, and in some cases it comes rather quickly. And the best place for Terry McLaurin to be is with the Washington Commanders. That team is significantly less without him. Terry McLaurin deserves his money from the Washington Commanders, and the Washington Commanders need to stop screwing around and get Jaden Daniels' best threat in the passing game satisfied. That's the joy of having your quarterback on a rookie-controlled contract, is you can pay some other people until it comes time to pay the proverbial piper, the quarterback. Micah Parsons, and if Micah Parsons were truly available, it would be ideally the guy the Browns would be more interested in pursuing. Again, I don't see it happening. The price for Micah Parsons, my guess would be a 3 first-round picks. We are talking about one of the dominant defenders in the entire NFL. He has only missed, I think, 3 to 4 games in his entire career to this point. He can rush the passer in a variety of ways from a variety of areas at both edge spots, interior. Kind of can just play a floater where he kind of just spies around the line where you're not necessarily sure what he's going to do. And he kind of just, finds the weak gap, shoots it, and usually gets home with a lot of success. There's not going to be a Micah Parsons sweepstakes. Eventually, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys will come out of this ether and, take care of Micah Parsons. Just give the guy what he wants. I mean, it's so stupid from the ownership and front office level of some NFL teams. You work so hard and you spend so much time in scouting these players, then you get them. You spend so much time and effort in developing these players and having them hit their ceiling, and then all of a sudden you get to these situations and it's, like you're kind of aggravated, you got to pay them. You get gold, you treat it like gold, and Washington certainly needs to do that with Terry McLaurin, and of course the Dallas Cowboys certainly need to do that with Micah Parsons. Practice 8. Now, Shedeur Sanders wasn't, a lights out day. Um, and I think the thing that we're starting to see with Shedeur is, he's not pressing anything. And, that is certainly something you're looking for in a rookie quarterback, because once you try to push the envelope, it's usually where it gets you into trouble, and things, usually don't go your way when you are now playing against NFL competition. And, Shedeur, if it's, if it's going to have to be a second or third or a fourth option, that's the open guy. Shedeur is showing the patience and the ability to, get through the read progressions, get those guys, the ball because they're open. And you just have to hope for the fact that sometimes the playmakers are indeed going to do just that. They are going to make the plays. Shedeur just, you know, and Kenny Pickett is back in practice, but he's not in anything team related just yet. So less than a week, for Pickett, because I guess we got the news Sunday, but he's back out at least on the field on Friday doing some things, trying to work back into practice, trying not to, get rusty, so to speak. There's still a possibility that, Kenny Pickett is in this quarterback race. I don't believe it. You guys know I don't believe it, but the Browns can continue to tell us that. Um, for Dillon Gabriel, it was just terrible, terrible day. Interception, some overthrown passes. You got Flourier absolutely lit up. And I've said this in the last couple of episodes, where we're talking about both Gabriel and Sanders. As this goes on, they should be improving. It shouldn't be, and everybody's entitled to a bad day, of course. But, Dillon Gabriel today, it was just not good. It was not good at all today. He just couldn't see things. The balls were inaccurate. Balls were low, throwing to guys and setting guys up to get hit. Bad day for Dillon Gabriel. And this is where it's going to get interesting, because we did mention the name Amari Cooper. The Amari Cooper pick that came to the Cleveland Browns in that trade with the Buffalo Bills turned out to be Dillon Gabriel. Top 100 pick on, a guy right now out of the 3 quarterbacks that are in Browns camp who are active is certainly looking like probably the third best of these 3 quarterbacks, which you certainly don't want. But what makes things, and this is where things can certainly get a little hairy if this path continues, is that, everybody's going to wonder why you just didn't take Shedeur where you took Dillon Gabriel and not bother with taking two quarterbacks. And, you could have used that pick certainly on a wide receiver, which you could have used. Could have used that pick on a safety, certainly, which was something you could have used. Other positional needs, certainly could have been addressed, and they were not. So, a day like this from Dillon Gabriel is going to bring up a lot of negative questions, rightfully so, for the Browns. Um, again, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay not to string them together. The Browns were in pads today on Friday. The Browns will be in pads again tomorrow on Saturday. Sunday, they will be off. They will practice on Monday. Then they will load up the bus, so to speak, and the team will head on down to Carolina. Have Wednesday joint practices with the Panthers. Probably a small walkthrough on Thursday. And then we go 100% legit live Friday night when the Carolina Panthers host our Cleveland Browns. The talk to this point is that, the quarterbacks for that game for the Cleveland Browns are probably going to be Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Again, there was no thought that Joe Flacco was going to play probably ever in preseason. And I don't know for Kenny Pickett if it's more of they're not sure if he's going to be ready. Maybe he'd be ready by then, but we're not still sure that if they're going to play him, which is certainly something to keep our eyes and ears on, as the week goes on here and the Browns, get to Saturday tomorrow and then basically begin a game week on Monday, as they start preparations and then travel down, of course, to go face the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Again, for Gabriel versus Sanders, if this turns out quickly, yes, that Shedeur Sanders is just a significantly better player than Dillon Gabriel. Anybody that's listened to the show since January, never essentially an issue with Dillon Gabriel. No. If you asked me whether or not I flat out felt Shedeur Sanders was better, I absolutely did. I'm not going to back away from that statement, obviously. Both guys continue to work hard. They're out on the field early before practice. They're out on the field after practice. The effort is what you're hoping for, is what you expect from young kids like this. So certainly that is, passing those tests, the commitment, the effort, wanting to be great, all of those things. But I think we're in a situation now where I think it's becoming more and more obvious to everybody that the quarterback you drafted in the 5th round is better than the quarterback you drafted in the 3rd round. It may be a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's certainly something that could be probably nitpicked. Too early to do it now, of course. But for those of you who are loading up those tweets for social media or some things you want to throw into the forums over on the OBR.com, you've got it right. You've certainly got it right. Again, just want to apologize to everybody yesterday. With no practice yesterday for the Browns and, torrential weather where I'm at. It just made it impossible to get a show up. Fortunately, it fell on an off day, and fortunately, it fell when there was not much actual Cleveland Browns news. So again, apologies and thanks for everybody for understanding. As camp goes on, you start to get a little bit more information, and when guys are getting or speaking on the regular, you start to learn a little bit more. Malik Collins was spoken to today, and it's someone had noticed obviously that he and Mason Graham were starting to develop a pretty good relationship on the field. And Malik Collins basically said that Mason Graham, after the last time they were all together in June, that Mason Graham was already picking the veteran's brain, and things like hey, where's your home, where do you work out? And obviously Collins, I believe it's the Houston Texans. I know it's Texas, I believe it's Houston. Basically, that's, where he's settled, and, that's where he gets all his work in. And, Mason Graham basically said, you mind if I roll through? And so Collins and Graham have spent some time together. I think this is a really good thing for Mason Graham because I think Mason Graham, I don't want to say was lacking. And I like, I don't want to imply that it wasn't there, but if there was one place that you're hoping to see an improvement for Mason Graham as he makes his transition from college to the NFL, is certainly as a pass rusher. That's kind of what you're hoping for. That's where you're hoping the development and the improvement come from. And, Malik Collins, the early part of his career wasn't much, fanfare, I would say. But, over the last few years, he's, proven to be a really, really solid interior pass rusher. And certainly for a guy like Graham who's trying to prove that aspect, that's the brain you want to pick. That's the workouts you want to join. So obviously, certainly good on Mason Graham for putting himself out there like that. And of course, making his way to Texas and, getting to work with a guy who's become really, really established as an interior pass rusher, really, really starting to, get an overall feel and just general like for this Browns rookie draft class. And let's just keep that in the perspective of the teams that are currently with the team. Um, so Graham, you just see putting in the effort, putting in the work, and this is what is the expectation? And this is usually the case, but you certainly get these guys who just get a little bit of taste of money, get a little taste of fame and celebrity, and just maybe can't stay necessarily on the right side of the road. Again, Greg Newsome, with the Morton Emerson injury, has kind of just been, and I guess, it's only been 2 practices, so I don't want to say entrenched, but it really looks like the plan, obviously, for Greg Newsome is to take over, out on the outside, go back to the outside, where he performed certainly admirably well as a rookie. Some injuries in year 2, which led to the emergence of Martin Emerson, and then all of a sudden kind of put Greg Newsome in a difficult spot where he kind of was the nickel guy, and they just felt so good about Martin Emerson's play and fit within the Jim Schwartz defense that it really kind of log jammed and stuck Newsome in a position that he didn't mind playing, but he didn't necessarily want to play. I think Greg handled most of it, with a class act to him, certainly. Um, But you're seeing early returns just after 2 days, and, the reminder of, that Greg Newsome was once a top 20 selection because of his ability to play on the outside as a cornerback. And, certainly a pivotal time for Greg Newsome, this being a contract year, saying all the right things that, he would like to remain here and be a Brown. And, certainly has these Midwest roots that, where, you're comfortable, certainly in these type of situations, these surroundings. And that's certainly the case, for Greg Newsome. He's been now here. That was his 5th season. Really wants to make this thing work. And now kind of having it all fall into his lap. It's certainly bittersweet with Emerson and Newsome being close, but in situations like this and professional sports and certainly in any professional world, you don't necessarily care how the desired position you want became open. If you were offered it and, you understand that, it certainly can help you long term, you're going to jump on the situation. And, credit to Greg Newsome, for being patient, certainly for being the good soldier. It seemed, last couple off seasons, everybody, well, and trying to, well, Greg Newsome doesn't want to play nickel. Well, it's not that he doesn't want to play nickel. Greg Newsome feels he's worthy of playing on the outside and certainly feels worthy of getting a contract commensurate with being an outside corner. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be weeks where Greg Newsome can't kick inside because that's just where the, better play is for Cleveland or the bigger weapon is for the opposition that the Browns feel it's just that important that having Newsome there to eliminate hopefully that nuisance of the slot position makes them a better team on that given day. But for all points to this, way everything's pointing to this point is, Greg Newsome on the outside, at least in base defense, early downs situations. Greg Newsome's kind of got this on lockdown. and this is going to necessarily kind of be his gig here for 2025 as the outside starting cornerback opposite of Denzel Ward. Browns got on the practice field Friday about 2 o'clock. They got off the practice field Friday about 3:20. Um, again, which seems to be the way things are being done here as far as rolling into what would be the off day on Sunday. The Browns will be on the practice field by between 9:30 tomorrow morning. Should be off the field by 11. Obviously, gives the players enough time to get home, enjoy the rest of their Saturday with their families, or whatever they choose to do. But then also get all of Sunday off as well. Um, Joe Flacco was a slow start to practice on Friday. Then Joe started picking it up. We threw a couple touchdown passes. There's just still something there with Joe. There's just, you know, because he is such a big guy and, he just can generate a lot of speed and power with that ball when he throws it. And normally that starts to fade a little bit, certainly, as you get to that magical number of 40. But for Joe, it's not showing any signs. And that's for me, again, why I always felt that this was basically Joe Flacco was the unnamed and anointed starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Again, we don't know how long it's going to go once the regular season kicks off. And certainly most of that will have to do with, is there any success from the Browns, or if there isn't any success from the Browns in the regular season, and the Browns can, choose to make, whatever decisions they feel necessary at that time, of course. But Joe's just still kind of got it. And, there's throws that Joe can make that Browns don't have any other quarterback on their roster right now, Kenny Pickett included, who can make these throws. And, you hope that Gabriel and Sanders in time can develop to hit those tight windows with some missiles. But, you know, until that day comes, you don't know if it's necessarily going to come. So, again, I really think the situation has a chance to get a little weird here. Gabriel certainly can rebound quickly and, get back to it and get back to his game. But, over the last few days, I just think, Shedeur Sanders is just showing that much more, which for many, this is kind of what we felt during the draft process before everything just got so extremely, extremely strange for Shedeur Sanders during the draft. They got some talk with linebacker coach Jason Tarver today. Mahmoud Diabate also spoke today. And what I just did in my last episode, I'm telling you guys, now you're hearing it from players. You're now hearing it from coaches. Carson Schlesinger is a special, special young talent. And, we can talk about Mason Graham and we can talk about the selections that were made on offense. But this 2025 rather, NFL draft class by the Cleveland Browns, headlined by Mason Graham. And of course, a huge part of this all being Carson Schlesinger. He's really just the deal. And, when Diabate was talking about him, he said, look, there's not really much chatter from Carson Schlesinger, which is smart. Don't be a rookie that talks that much during practice. You want to do it during a game, that's fine. But, you don't want to be the, rookie that's saying a lot at practice. Kind of rubs people the wrong way, certainly rubs veterans the wrong way. Browns brought in a wide receiver today. They brought in another cornerback today. After, certainly the injury to Emerson and then having to release Mike Woods. The belief is that Mike Woods will be a huge, huge practice squad candidate. Just with the broken hand that was suffered in the first day of training camp. I think the Browns just felt that by the time Woods would be ready to compete again, he really wouldn't have had much of an opportunity. So you go ahead and release him, you keep the relationship positive, and hopefully there's another chance or two for Mike Woods to fight for his opportunity here with the Cleveland Browns. Through practice squad, and we know how much guys have been taxied up and down from that list for Cleveland over the last few years. So, maybe the dream isn't dead just yet in Cleveland for Mike Woods, but it's gonna be a little bit before Mike Woods can be back out there, competing for playing time, certainly. We're a week away from facing the Carolina Panthers. Week away. And word came out today from Carolina that, right now at this point, Carolina is looking to play some starters and looking to play Bryce Young in that first preseason game. Look, everybody handles it different. And, for a team like Carolina, I think that probably had some momentum going as the season was coming to an end last year. It's probably not the worst idea in the world to get, your cream of talent to, right on the field in game situations as soon as possible. There certainly was momentum built by that franchise, and I think they're trying to, just have it go even further, extend it even further by having these guys get an opportunity like this in preseason. You just want to hopefully set yourself up to, have yourself a great start. Um, Again, the Browns, the plan appears to be that it'll be the rookies. It doesn't sound like there's any set scenario on how this is going to work out just yet. You have 1, 2, and a joint practice and a walkthrough. So you have about 3.5 days legitimately between now and Friday when the Browns will actually kick this all off as far as preseason games here in 2025. Certainly coming quickly. It is certainly coming quickly. DeJuan Jones was at practice today. Tevin Jenkins was back at practice today. So it's always good to hear about, guys coming back to practice or making it back to practice after, missing parts of one. And certainly appears to be, the case for the Browns. And, we know how much work this offensive line needs. We know how much is going to be put on this offensive line. Trying to try to run the ball a little more. You're probably going to have to rely on the offensive line more than ever. Because if it's not Joe, it's most likely going to be one of the two rookies in Gabriel, of course, or Shedeur Sanders. These guys are getting ready to seize the moment. There's no question about it. And, I think everybody is. And at this point, with a couple of practices left against your own teammates, you're kind of chomping at the bit at this point to, go ahead and hit somebody in another color jersey. Now, obviously the, opening here today, you have several players in the league right now currently unhappy with their contracts, currently unhappy with their contract negotiations with their current clubs. Terry McLaurin, certainly one of them from the Washington Commanders. You know, the analytics have kind of told us how the Browns would view a player like this being available. They were very much into Amari Cooper when he was 27 years old. They were very much into Jerry Jeudy when he was 25 years old. Amari Cooper, again, essentially when he turned 30 last June, the Browns told Cooper and his camp they had no interest in any type of contract extension whatsoever. They also reworked the deal where Cooper, basically ended up getting more of the money guaranteed, which also gave the Browns more flexibility and more leverage, and certainly the opportunity to recoup a little bit more by trading Amari Cooper, which they did, I believe it was October 15th of 2024, to the Buffalo Bills. Ironically enough, Amari Cooper actually, had quietly announced his retirement earlier today. Amari Cooper's first 2 years here in Cleveland, I don't think anybody will forget it. I still remember my initial reaction when it was basically announced that Amari Cooper was coming to the Cleveland Browns. Absolutely love the deal. Cooper did nothing but perform in 2022 and in 2023. It was just fantastic for them. Always maybe been some times where Coop had drop issues. But the fact that he wasn't in the league, and who knows, this could be a soft retirement. But Amari Cooper, after 9 years, it comes quickly to the end. It certainly does. And however anybody wants to talk or speak on Andrew Berry and some things, there are things that the man just absolutely gets 100% dead to rights. And you could not have handled the Amari Cooper situation any better than the Cleveland Browns did. You basically got him for a bag of peanuts. He played really, really well for you guys for 2 years. Then, as the year three was set to begin, Browns just felt it wasn't going to be there, and here we are now in the beginning of August, and obviously the rest of the league has followed suit in their belief of Amari Cooper. So, everybody wants to jump down about Andrew Berry, about everything. There are some wins here by your general manager, and maybe it's, you guys should kind of acknowledge that a little bit more often, of course. Tomorrow, Browns will practice. So I don't see any reason why we won't get you an episode up tomorrow. I told you, the plan was going to be if the Browns are going to practice, you're going to get an episode. Luckily things fell the way they did yesterday with the Browns not practicing and, the severe weather issues. So again, appreciate the understanding for that. But, I don't see any reason why we won't be out here tomorrow, giving you a recap on Browns practice day 9. They will be in pads, practice early, 9 a.m. window. So, make sure for all of that. We appreciate you all coming out for the OBR for the written content. We appreciate you coming out for the OBR streaming network. Make sure you get that VIP access over at OBR.com. You get the insider forums, you get the Ask the Insider options. And after a short, brief round of time, you will also get that bundled up with Paramount Plus. And who doesn't like free streaming, right? You're already paying for the OBR. Free streaming is just that, free. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on Twitch. And all that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. And we'll talk to y'all tomorrow.